Have you been working really hard at trying to manage your stress, anxiety, depression, burnout, trauma, and it just feels like the coping tools or the things that you've learned or the self-help tools that you've learned or the things you've researched online, it's just not working? You know, the anxiety is still there, the stress is still there, the depression is still there, the burnout is still there. Or it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back and it keeps coming back, or the trauma's not resolved. You're still getting all of those trauma responses. Maybe you might feel a little defeated or hopeless because you're looking for relief. You're looking for it to stop. You're looking for the tools to work, but for some odd reason, it just isn't working for you. I'm so sorry that you've been going through it. And, you know, my heart goes out to you and I have so much empathy for you in that sense. And I'm here to show you a different way to approach anything that's going on emotionally with your mental health, any trauma history, so you can get past that exhausting realm of coping and managing and get to that more life-giving place of healing and resolving, so you can take back your energy and take back control of your life and just move on from your mental health symptoms and move forward to something else. All right, what do I mean by all of this? Let's just do a quick breakdown of what I mean by managing and coping. Managing and coping on a symptom level, on a mental health symptom level, looks something along the lines of having like anxiety and trying to medicate it, or having depression and trying to numb it, being angry and trying to change your circumstances and situations to stop feeling angry, or wanting people around you to show up differently in order for you to stop being angry with them. That's one way to understand dealing with on a symptom level. Or let's just say when we have anxiety, which is rooted in fear, and going back to the emotions that cause suffering, and the three emotions that cause suffering are fear, anger, and grief. Anxiety and symptoms like anxiety, stress, and OCD are all rooted in fear, and symptoms of anxiety, stress, and OCD all have very common overlapping symptoms, including feeling overwhelmed, having a lot of physical responses like GI problems, cold sweats, a lot of overthinking and worrying, and this concept of this like impending doom of something bad's going to happen. It's very fearful in nature, and that's why the root emotion that's causing these diagnostic symptoms is fear. It's all rooted in fear. And a way to like manage that or cope with that, you know, in OCD, there's a lot of compulsions or ritualistic behavior, trying to do things to manage the intrusive thoughts. With anxiety, we try to control the situation by showing up differently, by cleaning up around the house, by working on a task that we feel accomplished in. Or when we're stressed out and overwhelmed, we might work through that stress with exercise, or trying to meditate through it, and or trying to journal about it. A lot of these coping tools that I'm talking about, they're good. They're good coping tools, and they'll help you get through that flare up, but they're not resolving it at the fear level. So symptom wise, and managing it when we're having a flare up of grief related symptoms, which could be burnout or depression, or, you know, if it gets really severe, you know, just kind of complete hopelessness and just kind of giving up in life. Those symptoms include like a lack of motivation, loss of pleasure in things that you used to have pleasure in, very heavy, very depleted. And because it's a really deep pain to deal with, and you know, my heart goes out to you if you're having a grief flare up. It's just my heart goes out to you with any of these emotions that cause suffering, because it's just they cause suffering, and you don't deserve that. Nobody does. You know, going back to grief, the pain is so heavy and it's so uncomfortable and it feels so unbearable. You know, we'll just try to numb it. Most of the time, we'll resort to self-medicating. That's the most common way to deal with grief, whether it's alcohol, prescription drugs, recreational drugs, and possibly any other type of dopamine seeking behavior, through like food, or binge watching something, or you know, having, you know, dopamine related like sex, or codependent kind of behaviors in that sense. And they can distract us from the pain, and they can numb us from the pain. Again, distracting and numbing, ways to manage, ways to cope, to get you through that big flare up of the grief, but it's still not touching the grief. It's still not resolving that core pain point, which is the grief. The grief needs to be resolved. But it'll help get you through it, right? Again, the coping tools and mechanisms that we work with to get through it, they're not bad for the most part, because they're the fast go-to things that we can go to like just get through a really painful flare-up emotionally. And that's all you need to know about that. And also to recognize that day in, day out, it keeps coming back. Those cycles keep coming back. So we need to find a point of resolution. Now, let's say the root cause of the suffering is anger. Anger shows up in, you know, and being annoyed, irritable, and frustrated, or flat out angry and upset, or having full-on rage. And, you know, that comes back down to boundary violations, and actually unresolved grief. And, you know, the ways that we might manage that is to maybe cut off relationships, walk away from a job, you know, start acting out with that point of frustration or irritability. Let's say, like, you know, our electronics aren't working, and we might just kind of like, you know, wrestle with it. Or in case of road rage, you know, we might just have a full-on angry outburst in the car, or sometimes get a little bit more hostile than that, and just and become violent or aggressive with others. So that just indicates that you're not feeling at peace within yourself, right? And anger, you know, as I've explained before, is considered more of a secondary emotion, because it's rooted actually in both fear and grief. It's unresolved fear and grief, usually mixed together, and played out through our relationships. Now, the anger one is really frustrating. Again, frustration being rooted in anger. Because there's a lot of betrayal involved in that, and often it goes back to self-betrayal. And then we also feel really hopeless and helpless, because that leaves us really self-isolated and living a really small world, and living a really small life, because we don't know how to fix those relational issues that show up with an anger trigger. And so rather than taking it out on someone, or a thing, we got to kind of go back to the body and realize, well, what's going on inside of me? And that goes back to like, okay, I'm feeling angry, and that's one of the most obvious emotions to recognize. Fear and grief might not be as obvious as anger is. Now, going back to those being the root causes, we want to also talk about the role of emotional constipation. As I've explained before, emotional constipation is basically just the accumulation and continued development of these emotions that cause suffering and start filling us up and overflowing us. The one really important factor that I don't think a lot of us have learned about emotions is that it does have an accumulative essence to it or dynamic to it, that it does need to be moved through and out of us, and that just kind of allowing or trying to cope with it or manage with it, with all of the examples that I gave earlier, never actually resolves it or heals the emotion that's causing us suffering, the fear, the anger, or the grief. And emotional constipation is just that, a very concept of just fear, anger, and grief that's built up over our lifetimes of just human experiences, of letdowns, hurt, fears, setbacks, betrayals, pain points that show up through the different woundings of that we experience in life, different gradients or degrees of traumas that we experience in life. And trying to manage them or cope with them never resolves them. So what do we do about that? Very easy. The steps are very easy and simple. They include containment, which is a psychological term to learn to sit with the discomfort, and breathing. Just learning to breathe through the discomfort. That's it. They're very simple and incredibly effective. And the way to understand that a little bit further goes back to a concept that I mentioned before, body acuity or sensory acuity. And that's just a really technical way of saying, just start getting more in tune with your body. Just get more connected with your body. Just start to read the messages that your body is expressing to you. Going back to connecting that with symptoms, oh, I'm overthinking. I'm really getting lost in my thoughts. I'm really worried about this, or that. I'm overthinking about something. I'm spiraling. That's most likely rooted in fear. And that's the symptom. And your body is giving you a message of like, hey, you're scared. And this is how it's showing up. Then take it back and be like, where am I feeling this fear? We often feel fear mostly in our gut, in our stomach, like in the pit of our stomach, or like a knot in our stomach. But it could be anywhere, and that's the whole goal here. That's what I'm trying to teach you here, is to learn how to read your body's messages. Like, okay, if I'm having a symptom of overthinking, it's my anxiety flaring up, and I just learned that that's rooted in fear. So I'm actually having a fear flare up. Let me not get too involved in the symptom of overthinking, and let me get more in tune with my body. And once I know where I'm feeling this flare up of fear, I'm gonna allow it to move through and out of me. That's the concept of containment, or even more of a clinical term is habituation, but it's the same concept. So you just allow it to move through you. Now, a secondary part to that is also breathing and breath work. Breathwork is my favorite medicine. I've studied medicines around the world. I have a lot of respect for the different types of medicines that exist out there, from plant medicines to herbal medicines to supplements to pharmaceutical medication. And, I've dabbled with all of them in different ways. And my favorite medicine by far is breath work. Your breath can get you through so much, especially when it comes to the emotional and mental processing that we're talking about here, when it comes to unresolved traumas or emotions that cause suffering, or emotions that are stuck inside of you, being emotionally constipated, and your body giving you messages through sensory triggers like, okay, am I feeling it in my stomach? Am I feeling it in my chest? Am I feeling it, am I clenching my jaw? Do I have a headache? Your body's just telling you like, hey, something's going on, pay attention to me. Your job is to be curious about what's going on in your body, where you're feeling it, and then allowing it to move through you. And the way to allow it to move through you is with the help of your breath. Now, why I know these steps work and they will help you heal and actually resolve your emotional wounding or your symptoms of fear, anger, or grief, or your unresolved traumas. Because I'm just taking you back to the basics of how we're designed and wired. If you look at an infant, that's exactly what an infant does. Infants feel really big rage or emotions from the moment that they're born, and before they can even hold their own heads up in the most vulnerable and fragile states, these big emotions, they have no choice but to sit there and allow that big feeling to move through them. And once they cry it out and they allow it to move through them, then they breathe through it, and then all of a sudden the issue is resolved, right? They're not doing anything else because they really can't do anything else. And clearly you've moved through infancy. That's why you're here able to watch this video. And clearly you're looking for resolution. Again, that's why you're here watching this video. So let's bring it back to the basics of how we're designed and how we're wired, to allow yourself to recognize what you're feeling. Is it fear, anger, or grief? Where you're feeling it. All right, it's stuck in me somewhere. Is it in my chest? Is it in my belly? Is it in my jaw? Is it in my head? Is it in my fists? And developing the capacity to do what naturally needs to be done to resolve an emotion, which is to sit with it, allow it to move through you, and use your breath to help you move through the discomfort and allow it to move through your body. Okay? So when you start developing these tools, what's going to happen is you're going to come back to peace and relief. You're not going to need to manage or cope with these symptoms anymore, and they won't show up as much anymore. They're going to start dying out, which is great. That's the whole point. That's what I mean by healing and resolving. You're just not going to need to deal with those emotions that cause suffering as much anymore. And when you have this peace and this relief in your body and in your life, you have this space that's just opened. And a lot of my clients, once they get to this point, they don't know what to do. And the next step after this is so much fun. It's all about creation, innovation, and identity development. I'm really excited to talk about that part with you in the next video. May peace be with you.